Question 1. Regulatory review indicates that the organization's security information and event management (SIEM) system must comply with specific data retention mandates for security logs. As the certified security operations manager, which of the following approaches best ensures regulatory compliance and operational effectiveness? Option A. Periodically delete logs based on an ad hoc assessment of storage capacity, without consulting regulatory guidelines or legal counsel. Option B. Configure the SIEM to retain all logs indefinitely to ensure maximum forensic capability, regardless of specific regulatory requirements or storage costs. Option C. Implement a data retention policy for SIEM logs that is explicitly aligned with the minimum and maximum retention periods stipulated by all applicable regulatory frameworks, with clear documentation of the rationale for these periods and technical controls to enforce them. Option D. Set SIEM data retention periods based on the perceived operational convenience of log access, without a formal review of specific regulatory mandates. The correct answer is C. Implement a data retention policy for SIEM logs that is explicitly aligned with the minimum and maximum retention periods stipulated by all applicable regulatory frameworks, with clear documentation of the rationale for these periods and technical controls to enforce them. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a security operations manager to balance the technical capabilities of a SIEM system with the stringent requirements of regulatory compliance, specifically concerning data retention and privacy. The manager must ensure that the SIEM not only collects and analyzes security events, but also adheres to legal mandates regarding how long that data is stored and who can access it, without compromising operational effectiveness or introducing new vulnerabilities. Careful judgment is required to interpret and apply these regulations to the specific configuration and operation of the SIEM. The correct approach involves a proactive and documented process of aligning SIEM data retention policies with the specific regulatory framework applicable to the organization. This includes understanding the legal minimums and maximums for log retention, considering the purpose of data collection, e.g., incident response, forensic analysis, compliance auditing, and implementing technical controls to enforce these policies securely and efficiently. This approach is right because it directly addresses the regulatory mandate, ensuring that the organization is compliant with data retention laws, thereby avoiding potential fines, legal repercussions, and reputational damage. It also demonstrates due diligence in managing sensitive security data. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on maximizing data retention without considering regulatory limits or the cost-effectiveness of storage is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of regulatory awareness and potentially an overzealous, but misguided, approach to security. It can lead to unnecessary storage costs and increased risk exposure due to the volume of data, without providing commensurate security benefits or meeting legal obligations. Another incorrect approach that involves setting data retention periods arbitrarily, without reference to any specific regulatory requirements or business needs, is also professionally flawed. This demonstrates a failure to understand the foundational principles of compliance and risk management. Such an approach risks either insufficient retention, leading to non-compliance, or excessive retention, leading to the aforementioned issues. Finally, an approach that prioritizes the deletion of logs based on perceived operational convenience or a misunderstanding of the regulatory landscape without a formal review process is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This can result in the accidental destruction of evidence crucial for investigations or audits, directly contravening legal requirements and undermining the integrity of the security operations function. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all applicable regulatory frameworks. This is followed by a thorough assessment of the SIEM capabilities and limitations in relation to these regulations. A documented policy development process involving legal and compliance teams is essential. Regular audits and reviews of SIEM configurations and data retention practices are critical to ensure ongoing compliance and adapt to changes in regulations or business needs. Question 2. Consider a scenario where a certified security operations manager, CSOM, is tasked with developing a new log collection, aggregation, and analysis strategy for a financial services organization operating under UK regulations. The organization has a vast array of systems, including customer-facing web applications, internal databases, employee workstations, and network infrastructure. Primary objective is to enhance security monitoring and ensure compliance with relevant data protection and financial services regulations. The CSOM must propose an approach that is both effective in detecting threats and compliant with legal requirements. Option A. Focus log collection exclusively on external-facing systems and network perimeter devices, assuming internal threats are less likely or manageable through other means. Option B. Rely on manual log review by a small team of analysts, supplemented by basic scripting for anomaly detection, to manage the log data. Option C. Implement a risk-based approach to identify critical log sources that provide visibility into potential security incidents and compliance violations, prioritizing their collection, aggregation, and analysis. Option D. Collect all available logs from every system within the organization, regardless of their perceived security relevance, to ensure no data is missed. The correct answer is C. Implement a risk-based approach to identify critical log sources that provide visibility into potential security incidents and compliance violations, prioritizing their collection, aggregation, and analysis. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in security operations, balancing the need for comprehensive log data with the practical constraints of storage, processing, and regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in identifying the most effective and compliant strategy for log collection, aggregation, and analysis without compromising security posture or incurring undue costs. Careful judgment is required to align technical capabilities with legal and ethical obligations. The correct approach involves a risk-based assessment to determine which log sources are critical for security monitoring and incident response, aligning with the principle of proportionality, often found in data protection and security regulations. This means prioritizing logs that provide visibility into potential threats, policy violations, and compliance requirements. By focusing on high-risk areas, an organization can ensure that its log management strategy is both effective and efficient, meeting regulatory mandates for audit trails and security event logging without unnecessary data sprawl. This aligns with the principle of data minimization and purpose limitation, ensuring that collected data serves a defined security purpose. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on collecting all available logs without a risk assessment is problematic. This can lead to an overwhelming volume of data, making effective analysis difficult and increasing storage and processing costs. It may also violate data minimization principles if irrelevant or low-value data is retained unnecessarily, potentially increasing the organization's attack surface and compliance burden. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes only logs from perimeter devices neglects critical internal threats and user activity. This creates blind spots in the security monitoring capabilities, leaving the organization vulnerable to insider threats, compromised internal systems, and lateral movement by attackers. Such a limited scope fails to meet the comprehensive logging requirements often mandated for detecting and responding to a wide range of security incidents. A third incorrect approach that relies solely on manual log review without automated aggregation and analysis tools is inefficient and unsustainable. It is practically impossible to effectively monitor large volumes of logs manually, leading to missed critical events and delayed incident response. This approach fails to leverage modern security technologies and best practices, significantly degrading the organization's ability to maintain a robust security posture and meet compliance obligations. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with understanding the organization's threat landscape and regulatory obligations. This involves identifying critical assets, potential threats, and the specific data required to detect and respond to them. A risk assessment should then guide the selection of log sources, ensuring that the chosen strategy is proportionate, effective, and compliant with relevant frameworks. Regular review and refinement of the log management strategy are essential to adapt to evolving threats and regulatory requirements. Question 3. Operational review demonstrates a significant number of identified vulnerabilities across the Security Operations Centers, SOC, hardware, software, and network infrastructure. Given the immediate need to restore full operational capability and the potential for exploitation, which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory compliance and professional security operations management principles for addressing these vulnerabilities? Option A. Immediately deploy broad-spectrum patches to all affected systems to address all identified vulnerabilities as quickly as possible. Option B. Defer all remediation activities until a complete overhaul of the SOC infrastructure can be planned and executed. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to prioritize remediation efforts based on vulnerability severity, potential impact, and likelihood of exploitation. Then develop and execute a phased remediation plan. Option D. Focus remediation efforts exclusively on vulnerabilities that are currently being actively exploited in the wild, as indicated by threat intelligence feeds. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to prioritize remediation efforts based on vulnerability severity, potential impact, and likelihood of exploitation. Then develop and execute a phased remediation plan. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a security operations manager, CSOM, to balance the immediate need for operational continuity with the long-term strategic imperative of maintaining a robust and compliant security infrastructure. The pressure to restore services quickly can lead to shortcuts that introduce significant risks. The CSOM must exercise sound judgment, informed by regulatory requirements and best practices, to ensure that the chosen remediation strategy is not only effective in the short term, but also sustainable and compliant in the long term. The challenge lies in navigating the tension between speed and thoroughness, especially when dealing with critical infrastructure. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a comprehensive risk assessment of the identified vulnerabilities and their potential impact on the SOC infrastructure. This assessment should prioritize remediation efforts based on the severity of the risk, the likelihood of exploitation, and the potential business impact. It requires understanding the specific regulatory framework governing the organization's operations, which for a CSOM in a U.S. context would likely involve NIST cybersecurity framework, relevant CMMC requirements if applicable, and potentially industry-specific regulations like HIPAA or PCI DSS. The risk assessment informs a prioritized remediation plan that addresses the most critical vulnerabilities first, ensuring that resources are allocated effectively and that compliance is maintained. This aligns with the principle of proactive risk management, a cornerstone of effective security operations and regulatory compliance. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing immediate broad-stroke patches without a prior risk assessment is an incorrect approach. This can lead to unintended consequences, such as system instability or the introduction of new vulnerabilities, and fails to prioritize the most critical threats. It bypasses the necessary due diligence required by regulatory frameworks that mandate a risk-based approach to security, focusing solely on patching the most visible or easily exploitable vulnerabilities, without considering their potential impact on critical business functions or data, is also incorrect. This approach is reactive and may overlook more insidious threats that, while less obvious, could have a devastating impact. It fails to meet the comprehensive risk management expectations of regulatory bodies. Delaying remediation until a full infrastructure overhaul can be planned is incorrect because it leaves the organization exposed to known vulnerabilities for an extended period. While a full overhaul might be a long-term goal, regulatory requirements and ethical obligations demand timely mitigation of identified risks to protect sensitive data and maintain operational integrity. This inaction directly contradicts the principle of continuous security improvement and timely risk mitigation. Professional reasoning. A CSOM should approach this situation by first understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to their organization, e.g., U.S. federal regulations, state laws, industry standards. The professional decision-making process involves 1. Identifying and cataloging all identified vulnerabilities within the SOC infrastructure. 2. Performing a thorough risk assessment for each vulnerability, considering its exploitability, potential impact on confidentiality, integrity, and availability of systems and data, and the likelihood of occurrence. 3. Prioritizing remediation actions based on the assessed risk levels, aligning with regulatory mandates for risk management. 4. Developing and executing a phased remediation plan that addresses high-risk vulnerabilities first, while also planning for longer-term infrastructure improvements. 5. Documenting the entire process, including the risk assessment, remediation decisions, and implementation steps to demonstrate compliance and provide an audit trail. Question 4. The investigation demonstrates that a critical system experienced an unexpected outage. The initial report from a senior executive immediately labels it as a major security breach due to the executive's personal concern about data integrity. However, preliminary technical analysis suggests the outage might be due to a hardware failure, though a potential, albeit low probability, exploit cannot be entirely ruled out without further deep investigation. What is the most appropriate initial classification and immediate next step for the security operations manager? Option A. Classify the incident as a high-impact system outage and immediately initiate a full forensic investigation involving legal and compliance teams while continuing to monitor the system for any signs of malicious activity. Option B. Classify the incident as a potential security incident and immediately focus all resources on containing the perceived breach based on the executive's report, delaying detailed technical analysis until containment is confirmed. Option C. Classify the incident as a major security breach, as reported by the senior executive, and immediately escalate to the highest level of incident response, prioritizing the executive's concerns over further technical validation. Option D. Classify the incident as a minor technical issue based on the initial technical assessment and defer further investigation until after the system is restored, focusing on other active security alerts. The correct answer is A. Classify the incident as a high-impact system outage and immediately initiate a full forensic investigation involving legal and compliance teams while continuing to monitor the system for any signs of malicious activity. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the desire to quickly contain a potential security incident and the ethical and regulatory obligation to conduct a thorough and unbiased initial classification. The pressure to demonstrate immediate action can lead to premature conclusions, potentially misclassifying an incident and diverting resources inappropriately. Careful judgment is required to balance urgency with accuracy and compliance. The correct approach involves a systematic, evidence-based classification process that adheres to established incident response frameworks and regulatory guidelines. This ensures that the incident is accurately categorized based on its potential impact, scope, and nature, allowing for the appropriate allocation of resources and response procedures. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and responsible security operations, as mandated by regulatory bodies that expect organizations to have robust and well-defined incident response plans. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate containment without proper classification risks misallocating resources, potentially escalating minor issues, or overlooking critical threats. This failure to accurately classify can lead to regulatory noncompliance if the incident's true nature, once revealed, falls under specific reporting or remediation requirements that were not initially identified. Furthermore, it undermines the integrity of the incident response process, eroding trust in the security operations team's capabilities. Another incorrect approach that involves classifying an incident based on the perceived seniority of the affected party, rather than its objective impact, is ethically unsound and professionally unacceptable. Security incidents should be classified based on their technical characteristics and potential business impact, not on political considerations. This can lead to a skewed perception of risk, where less severe incidents involving high-profile individuals receive disproportionate attention, while more critical incidents affecting broader systems or data are downplayed. This violates principles of fairness and impartiality. A further incorrect approach that involves classifying an incident based solely on the initial, unverified report without seeking corroborating evidence or conducting preliminary analysis is also a significant failure. This can lead to the misclassification of false positives or minor issues as major incidents, wasting valuable resources and potentially causing unnecessary alarm. It demonstrates a lack of rigor in the incident identification and classification process, which is a fundamental requirement for effective security operations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Initial triage. Gather preliminary information to understand the reported event. 2. Evidence collection. Secure and analyze available logs, alerts, and other relevant data. 3. Classification framework application. Utilize a predefined incident classification matrix, e.g., based on impact, scope, data sensitivity to categorize the incident. 4. Escalation and notification, based on the classification. Follow established protocols for escalation and informing relevant stakeholders. 5. Documentation. Maintain detailed records of the entire process, from initial report to final classification and response. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are data-driven, compliant, and ethically sound, promoting effective incident management. Question 5. The analysis reveals that a recent security audit of the organization's cloud infrastructure has identified several areas of concern. These include instances of overly permissive access controls on sensitive data repositories, a backlog of unpatched critical vulnerabilities on several servers, and several minor deviations from established logging configurations. The CSOM is tasked with preparing a summary report for senior management and the compliance officer, highlighting the most critical findings. Which of the following approaches best fulfills the CSOM responsibilities in this situation, considering the need for effective reporting and adherence to regulatory frameworks? Option A. The report lists all identified deviations, including the minor logging configuration issues, and provides a comprehensive overview of every single finding without prioritizing based on risk. Option B. The report highlights the unpatched critical vulnerabilities, but delays the reporting of overly permissive access controls, citing resource limitations in fully assessing the scope of potential unauthorized access. Option C. The report details the unpatched critical vulnerabilities and the overly permissive access controls, explaining the potential impact on data confidentiality and integrity, and proposes immediate remediation plans for these high-risk items. Option D. The report focuses on the minor logging configuration deviations, as these are easily quantifiable, and omits the findings related to access controls and unpatched vulnerabilities due to their complexity. The correct answer is C. The report details the unpatched critical vulnerabilities and the overly permissive access controls, explaining the potential impact on data confidentiality and integrity, and proposes immediate remediation plans for these high-risk items. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in security operations management, balancing the need for comprehensive reporting with the practical constraints of time and resources, while adhering to strict regulatory requirements. The CSOM must demonstrate not only technical understanding of security controls, but also the ability to translate audit findings into actionable intelligence that satisfies compliance obligations and informs strategic decision-making. The professional challenge lies in identifying the most critical findings that warrant immediate attention and detailed reporting, rather than simply listing all observed deviations. This requires a nuanced understanding of risk appetite, potential impact, and the specific mandates of the relevant regulatory framework. The correct approach involves prioritizing audit findings based on their potential impact and likelihood of exploitation, and then clearly articulating these high-priority issues in the report, along with recommended remediation steps. This aligns with the principles of effective risk management and regulatory compliance, ensuring that the organization's resources are focused on addressing the most significant threats. Specifically, for a CSOM operating under U.S. regulations, e.g., NIST frameworks, PCI DSS, HIPAA, depending on the specific industry context implied by the exam's jurisdiction. This means demonstrating an understanding of the least privilege principle in access controls, the importance of timely patch management for known vulnerabilities, and the necessity of robust incident response capabilities. A report that highlights these areas, supported by evidence from the audit, directly addresses common regulatory expectations for demonstrating due diligence in protecting sensitive data and systems. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on minor configuration deviations without assessing their risk context fails to meet the spirit of regulatory oversight, which is primarily concerned with mitigating significant risks to data confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Such an approach might lead to an overwhelming report with little actionable insight, potentially causing the organization to overlook more critical issues. Another incorrect approach, which omits findings related to access control weaknesses, directly contravenes fundamental security principles and regulatory mandates that emphasize the protection of sensitive information through strict access management. Failing to report on potential insider threats or unauthorized access vectors is a significant ethical and regulatory lapse. Lastly, an approach that delays reporting critical findings due to resource constraints, without a clear justification and escalation process, demonstrates a failure in operational responsibility and could lead to severe compliance penalties and security breaches. A professional reasoning process for a CSOM in such a situation should involve 1. Understanding the scope and objectives of the audit in relation to the organization's risk profile and regulatory obligations. 2. Categorizing audit findings by severity and potential impact, using a defined risk assessment methodology. 3. Prioritizing findings for reporting, focusing on those that pose the greatest threat to compliance and security. 4. Clearly documenting the evidence supporting each finding. 5. Developing practical and actionable remediation recommendations. 6. Communicating these findings and recommendations effectively to relevant stakeholders, including management and compliance officers, within established timelines. Question 6. The efficiency study reveals that the Security Operations Center, SOC, is experiencing delays in responding to Data Subject Access Requests, DSAR, due to a perceived conflict with real-time threat detection and response activities. As the Certified Security Operations Manager, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, while maintaining effective security operations? Option A. Temporarily deprioritize DSAR processing when high-severity security incidents are active, focusing all SOC resources on immediate threat mitigation, and address DSAR once the security situation stabilizes. Option B. Delegate the entire DSAR handling process to the legal department without establishing clear communication channels or data access protocols with the SOC, assuming they have the necessary expertise and access. Option C. Advise senior management that DSAR compliance is secondary to operational security and suggest that the organization adopt a policy of only responding to DSAR when legally compelled by a court order. Option D. Implement a documented workflow for DSAR handling that integrates with existing SOC processes, ensuring timely acknowledgement, verification, and data provision within GDPR timelines, and allocate specific resources or leverage automation for this task. The correct answer is D. Implement a documented workflow for DSAR handling that integrates with existing SOC processes, ensuring timely acknowledgement, verification, and data provision within GDPR timelines, and allocate specific resources or leverage automation for this task. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a critical gap in the organization's Security Operations Center, SOC, in handling data subject access requests, DSAR, under the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency with stringent legal compliance and the fundamental rights of individuals. A failure to adequately address DSAR can lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of trust from customers and regulators. The SOC manager must make a judgment call that prioritizes compliance and individual rights, while also considering the practicalities of SOC operations. The correct approach involves establishing a clear, documented process for handling DSAR that aligns with GDPR Article 15 and subsequent articles. This process must ensure that requests are acknowledged, verified, processed within the stipulated timeframe, typically 1 month, extendable by 2 further months, and that the requested data is provided in a commonly used electronic format. Crucially, this process must be integrated into the SOC's daily operations, potentially through dedicated workflows, automated tools, or clearly defined roles and responsibilities. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the legal obligations imposed by GDPR, safeguarding data subject rights, and mitigating regulatory risk. It demonstrates a proactive and compliant posture, essential for a certified security operations manager. An incorrect approach of prioritizing immediate threat mitigation over DSAR processing would be a significant regulatory failure. GDPR mandates timely responses to DSAR, and neglecting them, even for urgent security matters, violates the spirit and letter of the regulation. This could lead to fines and legal action. Another incorrect approach of delegating DSAR handling entirely to a non-specialized department without proper oversight or integration with SOC data sources would also be problematic. While delegation can be part of an efficient process, the SOC manager retains ultimate responsibility for ensuring compliance and the integrity of the data provided. This approach risks incomplete or inaccurate responses, further compounding compliance issues. Finally, An approach that involves simply ignoring DSAR due to perceived operational burden is a direct contravention of GDPR and demonstrates a severe lack of professional judgment and ethical responsibility. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a risk-based assessment that explicitly includes regulatory compliance as a primary risk factor. When faced with competing priorities, the SOC manager must first identify all applicable legal and regulatory obligations. Then they should evaluate the potential consequences of non-compliance, including financial penalties, legal repercussions, and reputational damage. The manager should then explore solutions that can address both operational needs and compliance requirements, such as implementing new technologies, refining existing workflows, or providing specialized training. In this specific DSAR scenario, the manager must recognize that GDPR compliance is not optional and must be integrated into the SOC's operational framework, rather than being an afterthought. Question 7. To address the challenge of a significant security incident that has disrupted critical services, what is the most appropriate immediate action for a Certified Security Operations Manager, CSOM, regarding the Incident Response Plan (IRP)? Option A. Temporarily implement ad hoc operational changes to mitigate immediate risks without formally updating the IRP until a later, unspecified time. Option B. Prioritize the complete overhaul of the IRP before focusing on restoring services, even if it means a prolonged period of service disruption. Option C. Immediately focus on restoring services to full operational capacity, deferring any review or updates to the IRP until after the recovery is complete and stable. Option D. Initiate immediate containment and eradication of the incident, while simultaneously beginning the process of documenting lessons learned and planning for IRP updates based on the incident's root cause and impact. The correct answer is C. Immediately focus on restoring services to full operational capacity, deferring any review or updates to the IRP until after the recovery is complete and stable. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it forces a security operations manager to balance the immediate need for operational continuity with the long-term imperative of maintaining a robust and compliant incident response plan. The pressure to quickly restore services after a significant security incident can lead to shortcuts that compromise the integrity and effectiveness of the IRP, potentially leading to future vulnerabilities and regulatory noncompliance. Careful judgment is required to ensure that immediate recovery actions do not undermine the foundational elements of the IRP. The correct approach involves prioritizing the immediate containment and eradication of the incident, while simultaneously initiating the process of updating the IRP based on lessons learned. This means documenting the incident, analyzing its root cause, identifying gaps in the existing IRP, and then formally incorporating these findings into a revised plan. This approach aligns with the principles of continuous improvement inherent in effective security management frameworks and regulatory expectations for proactive risk management. For example, in a U.S. context, frameworks like NIST SB 800-61, Rev. 2, Computer Security Incident Handling Guide, emphasize the importance of post-incident analysis and plan updates to enhance future response capabilities. Ethical considerations also dictate a commitment to learning from incidents to better protect the organization and its stakeholders. An incorrect approach of solely focusing on restoring services without any immediate documentation or commitment to IRP review would be professionally unacceptable. This failure to capture lessons learned directly contravenes the spirit of continuous improvement expected in security operations. It creates a risk of repeating the same mistakes and failing to adapt to evolving threats, which could lead to significant financial penalties and reputational damage if a similar incident occurs. Another incorrect approach of delaying any IRP updates until a later, unspecified date, even if documentation occurs, is also problematic. This deferral, driven by perceived urgency of other tasks, can lead to the lessons learned becoming outdated or lost, diminishing their value. Regulatory bodies often expect timely remediation and adaptation of security controls and plans following incidents. Finally, an approach that involves making ad hoc, undocumented changes to operational procedures without formally updating the IRP is highly risky. This creates a fragmented and inconsistent security posture, making it difficult to audit, train staff, or ensure consistent application of response protocols. It undermines the very purpose of having a formal IRP as a documented, authoritative guide. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that integrates immediate incident response with a structured process for post-incident review and IRP enhancement. This involves establishing clear roles and responsibilities for incident documentation and analysis, allocating resources for IRP updates, and setting realistic timelines for incorporating lessons learned. The focus should always be on a proactive and adaptive security posture, ensuring that incidents serve as opportunities for improvement rather than simply being reactive events. Question 8. The review process indicates that the SOC team structure is being evaluated for optimal effectiveness. Considering the distinct responsibilities of a SOC manager, security analysts, across different tiers, security engineers, and threat hunters, which of the following approaches best aligns with industry best practices for ensuring comprehensive security operations and regulatory compliance? Option A. Increase the number of Tier 1 analysts significantly to handle the high volume of alerts, assuming that more eyes on alerts will inherently improve detection rates. Option B. Focus primarily on acquiring the latest security technologies and tools, with the assumption that advanced tools will compensate for any deficiencies in team structure or role clarity. Option C. Implement a tiered analyst structure with clearly defined responsibilities for each tier. Ensure dedicated roles for security engineers to manage and optimize tools, and establish a proactive threat hunter function to identify advanced threats, all overseen by a strategic SOC manager. Option D. Consolidate all analyst responsibilities into a single security analyst role to simplify reporting lines and reduce management overhead. The correct answer is C. Implement a tiered analyst structure with clearly defined responsibilities for each tier. Ensure dedicated roles for security engineers to manage and optimize tools, and establish a proactive threat hunter function to identify advanced threats, all overseen by a strategic SOC manager. Explanation. The review process indicates a common challenge in security operations centers, SOC, ensuring optimal team structure and role clarity to effectively manage evolving threats. This scenario is professionally challenging because a poorly defined SOC team structure can lead to gaps in coverage, inefficient resource allocation, and ultimately, a diminished ability to detect and respond to security incidents. Careful judgment is required to align roles with operational needs and regulatory expectations. The correct approach involves a structured evaluation of the current SOC team's roles and responsibilities against industry, best practices, and relevant regulatory frameworks, specifically focusing on the distinct contributions of the SOC manager, analysts, Tier 1, 2, 3, engineers, and threat hunters. This approach is right because it ensures that each role is clearly defined, has appropriate authority and accountability, and contributes to the overall security posture in a way that aligns with the organization's risk appetite and compliance obligations. For instance, a well-defined SOC manager role ensures strategic oversight and resource management, while distinct analyst tiers allow for efficient incident triage and deep-dive investigations. Engineers are crucial for maintaining and optimizing security tools, and threat hunters proactively seek out sophisticated threats that may evade automated detection. This structured alignment is implicitly supported by general principles of good governance and operational efficiency expected within any regulated industry, aiming to demonstrate due diligence in security operations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on increasing the number of Tier 1 analysts without addressing the need for specialized roles like threat hunters or engineers would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of strategic thinking, potentially leading to an overwhelming volume of alerts that cannot be effectively managed by entry-level staff, thus increasing the risk of missing critical threats. It also neglects the essential functions of proactive threat hunting and the technical expertise required for tool maintenance and development. Another incorrect approach, which is to consolidate all analyst responsibilities under a single analyst title without differentiation, would also be professionally unacceptable. This lack of specialization hinders skill development, creates bottlenecks in incident response, and makes it difficult to assign ownership for complex investigations or proactive hunting activities. It fails to leverage the benefits of a tiered analyst structure for efficient alert handling and escalation. Finally, An incorrect approach that prioritizes tool acquisition over personnel development and role definition would be professionally unacceptable. While tools are essential, without a clear understanding of how different roles will utilize, manage, and interpret the data from these tools, their effectiveness is severely limited. This approach overlooks the human element critical to effective SOC operations and can lead to underutilized or misconfigured security technologies, creating a false sense of security. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve a continuous assessment of the threat landscape, organizational objectives, and available resources. This includes regularly reviewing and updating SOC operational procedures, role description, and training programs to ensure they remain relevant and effective. A key decision-making framework involves mapping current capabilities against desired outcomes and identifying any gaps, then prioritizing actions based on risk reduction and operational efficiency, always keeping regulatory compliance and ethical responsibilities at the forefront. Question 9. What factors determine the appropriate balance between comprehensive security monitoring across network, endpoint, and cloud environments, and the ethical imperative to protect user privacy and comply with data minimization principles? Option A. The perceived likelihood of a security incident and the potential for significant financial loss to the organization. Option B. The IT department's preference for centralized logging and the ease of integrating new monitoring tools into existing infrastructure. Option C. The organization's specific threat landscape, the sensitivity of the data being protected, and the applicable data privacy regulations. Option D. The availability of the latest security monitoring technologies and the desire to achieve maximum visibility regardless of data volume. The correct answer is C. The organization's specific threat landscape, the sensitivity of the data being protected, and the applicable data privacy regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it forces a security operations manager to balance the imperative of comprehensive security monitoring with the ethical and legal obligations of data privacy and proportionality. The manager must decide which monitoring techniques are justified given the specific threat landscape and the potential impact on individual privacy. Over-monitoring can lead to excessive data collection, privacy violations, and resource inefficiency, while under-monitoring can leave the organization vulnerable. Careful judgment is required to select techniques that are both effective and compliant. The correct approach involves a risk-based assessment that prioritizes monitoring based on the likelihood and impact of identified threats, while adhering strictly to data minimization principles and relevant privacy regulations. This approach ensures that monitoring efforts are proportionate to the risks faced by the organization and that only necessary data is collected and analyzed. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing data protection and cybersecurity, often mandate such a balanced approach, emphasizing the need for justified data collection and processing. Ethical considerations also dictate that individuals' privacy should be respected, and monitoring should not be overly intrusive without clear justification. An incorrect approach that relies solely on deploying the most advanced and comprehensive monitoring tools without a clear threat justification fails to consider proportionality and data minimization. This can lead to the collection of vast amounts of sensitive personal data that is not necessary for security purposes, potentially violating privacy regulations and creating an ethical breach. Another incorrect approach that focuses only on network-level monitoring while neglecting endpoint and cloud environments creates significant blind spots, leaving critical assets unprotected and failing to meet the duty of care expected of a security operations manager. This reactive stance, rather than a proactive, risk-informed one, is a failure in operational security management. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough threat intelligence assessment to understand the specific risks. This should be followed by a review of applicable regulatory requirements and internal policies regarding data privacy and monitoring. The manager should then evaluate various monitoring techniques, considering their effectiveness against identified threats, their intrusiveness, and the data they collect. The chosen techniques must be proportionate to the risks, aligned with legal and ethical obligations, and supported by clear documentation justifying their necessity. Regular review and refinement of monitoring strategies are also crucial to adapt to evolving threats and regulatory landscapes. Question 10. Market research demonstrates that organizations often face pressure to rapidly restore operations after a significant security incident involving data compromise. In the context of UK regulatory frameworks, specifically the Data Protection Act 2018 and GDPR, which of the following approaches to data restoration and system rebuild following such an incident best demonstrates adherence to regulatory compliance and professional best practice? Option A. Restore from the most recent available backup without performing integrity checks, assuming it is free from corruption, to minimize downtime. Option B. Implement a phased restoration process, prioritizing data integrity and security, followed by thorough validation against RPOs and RTOs, while maintaining comprehensive audit trails of all activities. Option C. Expedite system rebuild by bypassing detailed data validation steps, focusing solely on bringing essential services back online as quickly as possible. Option D. Prioritize restoring only the most critical systems and data, deferring the documentation and restoration of less critical components until after initial operational recovery. The correct answer is B. Implement a phased restoration process, prioritizing data integrity and security, followed by thorough validation against RPOs and RTOs, while maintaining comprehensive audit trails of all activities. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because a critical data restoration process is underway following a significant security incident, and the organization must balance the urgency of recovery with strict adherence to regulatory requirements. The pressure to restore operations quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise data integrity, security, or compliance. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the recovery procedures not only bring systems back online, but also meet all legal and regulatory obligations, particularly concerning data protection and auditability. The correct approach involves a phased restoration process that prioritizes data integrity and security, followed by thorough validation against established recovery point objectives, RPO, and recovery time objectives, RTO, all while maintaining comprehensive audit trails. This aligns with the principles of data governance and operational resilience mandated by regulations such as the UK's Data Protection Act 2018, DPA 2018, and the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, which require organizations to implement appropriate technical and organizational measures to ensure the security and integrity of personal data, including during recovery. Maintaining detailed logs of all restoration activities provides the necessary evidence for compliance audits and demonstrates due diligence in protecting data. An incorrect approach that bypasses validation steps to expedite system rebuild is professionally unacceptable. This failure directly contravenes regulatory requirements for data accuracy and integrity. For instance, the DPA 2018 and GDPR place a strong emphasis on the accuracy of personal data. Restoring data without proper validation risks reintroducing corrupted or incomplete information, violating these principles. Furthermore, skipping validation makes it impossible to confirm that RPOs and RTOs have been met, undermining the organization's disaster recovery plan and its ability to demonstrate compliance with business continuity requirements. Another incorrect approach that involves restoring from the most recent available backup without verifying its integrity or considering potential corruption introduces significant risk. This can lead to the reintroduction of malware or the restoration of compromised data, creating further security vulnerabilities and potentially violating data security obligations under regulations like the DPA 2018. The lack of integrity checks means the organization cannot be certain that the restored data is trustworthy or free from the original incident's impact. Finally, an approach that prioritizes restoring only critical systems without documenting the full scope of data affected, and the restoration process for all systems is also professionally flawed. This lack of comprehensive documentation hinders post-incident analysis and makes it difficult to prove to regulators that all data, including personal data, has been handled appropriately throughout the recovery. It also fails to meet the spirit of robust incident response and recovery planning, which requires a complete understanding and documented remediation of the incident's impact. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve 1. Understanding the incident's scope and impact on data and systems. 2. consulting the organization's documented disaster recovery and business continuity plans, paying close attention to RPOs and RTOs. 3. Identifying all applicable regulatory requirements related to data protection, security, and operational resilience. 4. Developing a phased recovery strategy that incorporates data integrity checks, security validation, and comprehensive logging. 5. Obtaining necessary approvals for the recovery plan, ensuring stakeholders are aware of potential risks and timelines. 6. Executing the recovery plan meticulously, documenting every step. 7. Conducting post-recovery validation and testing to confirm system functionality and data integrity. 8. Performing a thorough post-incident review to identify lessons learned and update procedures. Question 11. The monitoring system demonstrates a significant increase in suspicious network activity originating from several user workstations, prompting a discussion about the immediate implementation of an endpoint detection and response (EDR) solution across the entire organization. Considering the Certified Security Operations Manager (CSOM), exams focus on regulatory compliance and operational efficiency. Which of the following implementation strategies best addresses this situation? Option A. Postpone the EDR deployment until a more comprehensive threat assessment can be completed and a larger budget can be secured for a full-scale implementation. Option B. Immediately deploy the EDR solution to all endpoints across the organization to ensure maximum coverage and immediate threat detection capabilities. Option C. Initiate a phased rollout of the EDR solution, starting with a pilot group of critical servers and a representative sample of user workstations to assess performance, efficacy, and operational impact before a full-scale deployment. Option D. Deploy the EDR solution only to the workstations exhibiting the highest volume of suspicious activity, focusing resources on the most immediate perceived threats. The correct answer is C. Initiate a phased rollout of the EDR solution, starting with a pilot group of critical servers and a representative sample of user workstations to assess performance, efficacy, and operational impact before a full-scale deployment. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in security operations, balancing the need for comprehensive threat detection with the practicalities of resource allocation and potential operational impact. The professional challenge lies in making a data-driven decision that aligns with the organization's risk appetite, regulatory obligations, and operational capabilities, rather than simply reacting to an alert. Careful judgment is required to avoid both underdetection, missing critical threats, and overdetection, leading to alert fatigue and wasted resources. The correct approach involves a phased, risk-based deployment of EDR capabilities. This begins with a pilot program on a representative subset of endpoints to validate the technology's effectiveness, assess its performance impact, and refine detection rules and response playbooks. This iterative process allows for informed decision-making regarding broader rollout, ensuring that the chosen EDR solution meets the organization's specific security objectives and compliance requirements without causing undue disruption. This aligns with the principle of proportionality in security investments and the need for due diligence in adopting new technologies, often implicitly or explicitly required by regulatory frameworks that mandate a risk-based approach to cybersecurity. An incorrect approach would be to immediately deploy EDR across all endpoints without prior testing. This risks significant operational disruption, performance degradation, and potential incompatibility issues, leading to a failure to meet the intended security outcomes and potentially violating service-level agreements or operational continuity requirements. Another incorrect approach is to delay deployment indefinitely due to perceived complexity or cost, which represents a failure to adequately address known or emerging threats and a potential breach of regulatory obligations to maintain a reasonable standard of security. Finally, deploying EDR without a clear strategy for alert triage and incident response would lead to alert fatigue and an inability to effectively act on detected threats, rendering the investment ineffective and failing to meet the core purpose of an EDR solution. Professionals should approach such decisions by first understanding the organization's threat landscape and regulatory obligations. This is followed by a thorough evaluation of potential solutions, including pilot programs and proof-of-concept testing. The decision to scale deployment should be based on the validated effectiveness, performance impact, and cost-benefit analysis, ensuring alignment with the organization's overall security strategy and risk management framework. Question 12. Quality control measures reveal that the current Security Operations Center (SOC) alerting system generates a high volume of notifications, many of which contain sensitive details about potential system vulnerabilities and user activity. The SOC team is concerned that the primary notification method, unencrypted email, is insufficient for protecting this information and is also leading to delays in response as analysts spend excessive time filtering and verifying alerts. The organization operates under a framework that mandates prompt incident reporting and the protection of sensitive data. Which of the following approaches best addresses these concerns while adhering to regulatory requirements? Option A. Implement a tiered alerting system that categorizes alerts by severity and data sensitivity. Critical alerts with immediate response implications are sent via secure, authenticated messaging platforms to designated responders. Less critical alerts, or those requiring further investigation, are logged in a secure incident management system, with notifications for these sent through encrypted email or secure portal updates to relevant stakeholders. Option B. Develop a policy that requires a full forensic investigation to be completed for every alert before any notification is sent to stakeholders, to ensure all information is accurate and complete. Option C. Continue using unencrypted email for all alerts to maintain maximum speed of delivery, and rely on individual analyst discretion to determine what information is sensitive and should be redacted before forwarding. Option D. Transition all alert notifications to a single, highly secure, encrypted email system to ensure data confidentiality, accepting that this may introduce some latency in the delivery of critical alerts. The correct answer is A. Implement a tiered alerting system that categorizes alerts by severity and data sensitivity. Critical alerts with immediate response implications are sent via secure, authenticated messaging platforms to designated responders. Less critical alerts, or those requiring further investigation, are logged in a secure incident management system, with notifications for these sent through encrypted email or secure portal updates to relevant stakeholders. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the need for timely and effective incident response and the regulatory requirements for data privacy and secure communication. A certified security operations manager (CSOM) must balance these competing demands, ensuring that alerts are actionable without compromising sensitive information or violating established protocols. The challenge lies in designing and implementing an alerting system that is both efficient and compliant, particularly when dealing with potentially sensitive data. The correct approach involves a multi-tiered notification strategy that prioritizes critical alerts for immediate action, while ensuring that less urgent or more sensitive information is handled through secure, authenticated channels. This approach aligns with regulatory frameworks that mandate timely incident reporting and response, while also emphasizing data protection principles. Specifically, it adheres to the spirit of regulations that require organizations to have robust incident response plans and to protect personally identifiable information (PI) or other sensitive data from unauthorized disclosure. By segmenting alerts based on severity and data sensitivity, and by using secure communication methods for detailed information, the organization demonstrates due diligence in both security operations and regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach that relies solely on broad, unencrypted email notifications for all alerts is professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet regulatory requirements for data protection and privacy. Such a method risks exposing sensitive incident details, including potential PII or intellectual property, to unauthorized parties, leading to breaches of confidentiality and potential regulatory penalties. Another incorrect approach, which involves delaying notifications until a full forensic investigation is complete, is also professionally flawed. While thorough investigation is crucial, excessive delay in alerting relevant stakeholders or initiating response actions can violate regulatory mandates for prompt incident reporting and mitigation. This can lead to increased damage, greater financial loss, and non-compliance with breach notification timelines. A third incorrect approach, which involves bypassing established notification channels for expediency without proper authorization or documentation, undermines the integrity of the security operations framework. While speed is important, Ad hoc communication can lead to miscommunication, missed critical steps, and a lack of auditable records, which are often required by regulators to demonstrate compliance and effective governance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a risk-based assessment of alert types, data sensitivity, and regulatory obligations. This includes establishing clear escalation paths, defining communication protocols for different alert severities, and ensuring that all notification methods are secure and auditable. Regular review and testing of the alerting system against regulatory requirements and operational needs are essential for maintaining compliance and effectiveness. Question 13. Risk assessment procedures indicate that following a recent data breach, the post-incident analysis has been completed. As the certified security operations manager, which of the following approaches best ensures that lessons learned are effectively integrated to improve future security operations and comply with relevant regulatory frameworks? Option A. Archive the incident report and lessons learned documentation, as the immediate threat has been contained and resources are needed for proactive threat hunting. Option B. Conduct a blame-free review of the incident, focusing on identifying systemic vulnerabilities, process gaps, and recommending prioritized, actionable improvements to security controls and procedures. Option C. Initiate an investigation to pinpoint the specific individuals responsible for the breach and implement disciplinary actions to deter future mistakes. Option D. Immediately implement a series of superficial security patches and conduct mandatory retraining for all personnel involved in the incident, without a deeper analysis of the root causes. The correct answer is B. Conduct a blame-free review of the incident, focusing on identifying systemic vulnerabilities, process gaps, and recommending prioritized, actionable improvements to security controls and procedures. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in security operations, translating post-incident findings into actionable improvements while managing organizational pressures. The professional challenge lies in balancing the imperative for thorough, objective analysis with the potential for blame avoidance or resource constraints within the organization. A security operations manager must exercise careful judgment to ensure that lessons learned are genuinely integrated to enhance future security posture, rather than becoming a perfunctory exercise. The correct approach involves a structured, blame-free review focused on identifying systemic weaknesses and recommending concrete, prioritized improvements. This aligns with the principles of continuous improvement mandated by many regulatory frameworks and industry best practices, which emphasize learning from security events to strengthen defenses. Specifically, in a U.S. context, frameworks like NIST SB 800-61, Rev. 2, Computer Security Incident Handling Guide, stress the importance of post-incident activities, including lessons learned, to improve incident response capabilities and overall security. Ethical considerations also dictate a commitment to organizational security and the protection of data, which necessitates a proactive approach to preventing recurrence of incidents. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on identifying individual culpability fails to address the root causes of the incident and can foster a culture of fear, hindering open reporting and learning. This is a significant ethical failure, as it deviates from the principle of organizational responsibility for security and can lead to a lack of trust. Furthermore, it neglects the regulatory expectation to improve security processes and controls. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate, low-cost fixes without a thorough understanding of the underlying issues is also professionally unacceptable. While resource constraints are a reality, a superficial response to lessons learned undermines the integrity of the incident response process and fails to achieve the desired security enhancements. This can lead to repeated incidents and potential regulatory noncompliance if systemic vulnerabilities are not addressed. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Establishing clear objectives for the post-incident analysis, focusing on learning and improvement. 2. Employing a structured methodology for data collection and analysis, ensuring objectivity. 3. Facilitating a blame-free environment for discussion and feedback. 4. Prioritizing recommendations based on risk and impact. 5. Developing a clear action plan with assigned responsibilities and timelines. 6. Tracking the implementation of recommendations and verifying their effectiveness. Question 14. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new, comprehensive security policy with enhanced threat intelligence feeds and advanced SIEM capabilities, will significantly increase operational expenditure in the short term. But a less comprehensive, lower-cost policy focusing only on essential logging and basic alert correlation would reduce immediate costs, which approach best aligns with the principles of robust SOC governance and operational resilience. Option A. Implement the comprehensive security policy, prioritizing long-term risk reduction and regulatory compliance. Option B. Implement the lower-cost policy and focus on manual threat hunting to compensate for the lack of automated detection. Option C. Adopt the lower-cost policy, deferring investment in advanced capabilities until a clear business case for increased expenditure emerges. Option D. Implement the comprehensive security policy, but seek to outsource the advanced SIEM capabilities to reduce internal operational costs. The correct answer is A. Implement the comprehensive security policy, prioritizing long-term risk reduction and regulatory compliance. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a security operations manager, CSOM, to balance the immediate financial implications of a security policy with its long-term effectiveness and compliance obligations. The pressure to reduce operational costs can lead to decisions that compromise security posture and regulatory adherence. Careful judgment is required to ensure that cost-saving measures do not inadvertently create significant risks or violate established governance frameworks. The correct approach involves prioritizing the implementation of a comprehensive, risk-based security policy that aligns with the organization's strategic objectives and regulatory requirements, even if it incurs initial costs. This approach is best professional practice because it directly addresses the core mandate of a CSOM, to protect organizational assets and data. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing data protection and operational resilience, e.g., GDPR if the jurisdiction were EU, or NIST-CSF if US, but adhering strictly to the CSOM exam's implied jurisdiction, which focuses on general security operations governance, mandate that security measures are proportionate to identified risks. A risk-based policy ensures that resources are allocated effectively to address the most critical threats, thereby providing a robust defense and maintaining compliance. This proactive stance minimizes the likelihood of costly breaches and regulatory penalties. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction by scaling back essential security monitoring tools would be professionally unacceptable. This fails to acknowledge the inherent risks associated with reduced visibility and detection capabilities. Such a decision could lead to undetected security incidents, resulting in significant financial losses from data breaches, reputational damage, and potential regulatory fines for noncompliance with security standards. Another incorrect approach, which involves deferring policy updates until a security incident occurs, demonstrates a reactive rather than proactive security posture. This is ethically unsound and violates the principle of due diligence expected of a CSOM. It exposes the organization to unnecessary risks and suggests a lack of foresight and commitment to maintaining an adequate security framework. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough risk assessment, followed by an evaluation of potential policy solutions against established security frameworks and regulatory mandates. The cost-benefit analysis should then be applied to these viable solutions, considering not only immediate expenses, but also the potential costs of inaction or inadequate security, including incident response, recovery, and regulatory penalties. The ultimate decision must prioritize the organization's security posture and compliance obligations over short-term financial gains. Question 15. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive understanding of the legal and regulatory landscape to effectively manage security incidents. When a significant data breach occurs, impacting personal data of individuals within the United States, what is the most critical initial step for a CSOM to ensure compliance with relevant laws and regulations? Option A. Begin drafting public statements and internal communications to inform all stakeholders about the incident and the steps being taken. Option B. Focus on technical containment and eradication of the threat to prevent further unauthorized access, deferring legal considerations until the incident is fully resolved. Option C. Consult with legal counsel to determine specific notification obligations under applicable U.S. federal and state data breach laws. And to guide the evidence preservation process, Option D. Immediately initiate a full forensic investigation to identify the root cause and scope of the breach, prioritizing the preservation of all digital evidence. The correct answer is D. Immediately initiate a full forensic investigation to identify the root cause and scope of the breach, prioritizing the preservation of all digital evidence. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because the Certified Security Operations Manager, CSOM, must balance the immediate need to contain a security incident with the complex legal and regulatory obligations that arise during and after the incident. Failure to adhere to these requirements can lead to significant penalties, reputational damage, and loss of trust from stakeholders. Careful judgment is required to navigate the nuances of data breach notification laws, evidence preservation, and stakeholder communication. The correct approach involves a proactive and compliant incident response plan that prioritizes legal and regulatory adherence from the outset. This means understanding the specific reporting timelines and requirements mandated by relevant regulations, such as the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, if dealing with EU data subjects, or specific U.S. state breach notification laws if operating within the United States. It also necessitates establishing clear protocols for evidence preservation to ensure that any forensic investigation is legally sound and admissible. Should legal action or regulatory inquiry follow, engaging legal counsel early is crucial to interpret these obligations accurately and guide the response. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical containment without considering legal notification timelines would fail to meet regulatory obligations. For instance, delaying notification to data protection authorities or affected individuals beyond the stipulated periods under GDPR or U.S. state laws constitutes a direct violation, leading to fines and sanctions. Another incorrect approach, which involves the hasty deletion or alteration of potentially relevant logs and data to expedite containment or investigation, would compromise evidence integrity. This jeopardizes any subsequent forensic analysis and can be viewed as obstruction of justice or regulatory inquiry, incurring severe legal repercussions. A third incorrect approach, which involves communicating incident details broadly to stakeholders without legal review, risks violating confidentiality agreements, misrepresenting facts, or disclosing sensitive information prematurely, potentially prejudicing legal proceedings or regulatory investigations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that integrates legal and regulatory considerations into every stage of incident response. This framework should include 1. Pre-incident preparation, developing and regularly updating an incident response plan that explicitly addresses legal and regulatory requirements, including contact information for legal counsel and relevant regulatory bodies. 2. Incident detection and analysis, immediately assessing the potential legal and regulatory implications of the incident, including the type of data compromised and the jurisdictions affected. 3. Containment and eradication, implementing containment measures while ensuring that evidence is preserved according to established forensic best practices and legal guidelines. 4. Notification and communication, consulting with legal counsel to determine notification obligations and crafting communications that are accurate, compliant, and strategically timed. 5. Post-incident review, conducting a thorough review to identify lessons learned and update the incident response plan to improve future compliance and effectiveness. Question 16. The risk matrix shows a significant number of medium-severity vulnerabilities across critical business systems. The security operations team has identified several potential remediation strategies. Which strategy best aligns with a risk-based approach to vulnerability management, ensuring both security posture improvement and operational continuity? Option A. Focus solely on the number of vulnerabilities, initiating a broad patching campaign for all medium-severity findings to reduce the overall vulnerability count reported. Option B. Immediately deploy patches for all identified medium-severity vulnerabilities across all critical systems to eliminate the risk as quickly as possible. Option C. Prioritize remediation efforts by correlating the identified vulnerabilities with asset criticality, potential business impact, and current threat intelligence. Then develop a phased remediation plan focusing on the highest risk vulnerabilities first. Option D. Defer remediation of all medium-severity vulnerabilities until after the current quarter's major project deadlines have passed to avoid any potential operational disruption? The correct answer is B. Immediately deploy patches for all identified medium-severity vulnerabilities across all critical systems to eliminate the risk as quickly as possible. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a security operations manager to balance the immediate need for vulnerability remediation with the broader strategic imperative of maintaining operational continuity and adhering to established risk management frameworks. The pressure to address all identified vulnerabilities quickly can lead to rushed decisions that might disrupt critical business functions or overlook the true impact of certain risks. Careful judgment is required to prioritize effectively, ensuring that resources are allocated to address the most significant threats without causing undue harm to the organization. The correct approach involves a systematic process of vulnerability assessment, risk analysis, and prioritized remediation planning, aligned with the organization's risk appetite and regulatory obligations. This approach is right because it directly addresses the core principles of effective security operations management. By correlating scan results with business impact and threat intelligence, the manager can accurately assess the risk posed by each vulnerability. This allows for the development of a remediation plan that addresses high-risk vulnerabilities first, while potentially deferring or mitigating low-risk ones. This aligns with regulatory frameworks that mandate a risk-based approach to information security, such as the principles of ISO 27001, if applicable to the exam's jurisdiction, or NIST CSF, if applicable, which emphasize understanding and managing risks to protect information assets. Ethically, it demonstrates due diligence and responsible stewardship of organizational resources and data. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the number of vulnerabilities identified, without considering their severity or potential impact, is professionally unacceptable. This approach fails to acknowledge that not all vulnerabilities carry the same level of risk. It can lead to misallocation of resources, addressing minor issues while neglecting critical ones, and potentially causing unnecessary disruption to operations by attempting to fix everything at once. This demonstrates a lack of strategic thinking and a failure to implement a robust risk management program, which could be a compliance failure if specific regulations require risk-based prioritization. Another incorrect approach that involves immediately patching all identified vulnerabilities without proper testing or impact assessment is also professionally unacceptable. This can introduce new instability into systems, cause unexpected downtime, and disrupt critical business processes. While prompt remediation is important, it must be balanced with operational stability. This approach disregards the principle of change management and can lead to significant business losses and reputational damage, which are often implicitly or explicitly covered by regulatory requirements for business continuity and operational resilience. A third incorrect approach that involves ignoring vulnerabilities deemed low risk without further review, even if they are numerous, is professionally unacceptable. While prioritization is key, a blanket dismissal of any category of vulnerability without understanding potential cumulative effects or future exploitation vectors is a significant oversight. This can create a false sense of security and leave the organization exposed to emerging threats or complex attack chains that exploit seemingly minor weaknesses. This demonstrates a failure to conduct thorough risk analysis and can lead to non-compliance with regulations that require a comprehensive security posture. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the scope and context of the vulnerability scan results. 2. Correlating identified vulnerabilities with asset criticality and business impact. 3. Leveraging threat intelligence to understand the exploitability and potential consequences of each vulnerability. 4. Applying the organization's defined risk appetite and tolerance levels. 5. Developing a prioritized remediation plan that balances risk reduction with operational stability and resource availability. 6. Documenting the decision-making process and rationale for all remediation actions. Question 17. The assessment process reveals that the security operations team is receiving a high volume of threat intelligence feeds from various sources, but these are not consistently translating into prioritized security actions or demonstrable risk reduction. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of effective threat intelligence integration for a certified security operations manager, CSOM, operating under a risk-based framework? Option A. Establish a dedicated threat intelligence team to analyze all incoming data, producing detailed reports that are then archived for future reference without direct integration into immediate security control adjustments. Option B. Conduct a thorough risk assessment to identify the organization's most critical assets and potential threat actors. Then prioritize threat intelligence based on its relevance to these identified risks and potential impact on business operations. Option C. Implement a system to automatically ingest all incoming threat intelligence feeds and trigger alerts for any matching indicators of compromise, IOC, against the organization's network. Option D. Focus on integrating the most technically sophisticated and cutting-edge threat intelligence platforms, regardless of their direct applicability to the organization's current threat landscape. The correct answer is C. Implement a system to automatically ingest all incoming threat intelligence feeds and trigger alerts for any matching indicators of compromise, IOC, against the organization's network. Explanation: the assessment process reveals a common challenge in security operations, effectively integrating diverse threat intelligence sources into actionable security measures. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires not only technical understanding of threat intelligence, but also a strategic approach to risk management, aligning with the Certified Security Operations Manager, CSOM. Exams focus on operational leadership and governance. The difficulty lies in translating raw intelligence into concrete, prioritized security enhancements that demonstrably reduce risk, while adhering to specific regulatory frameworks. Careful judgment is required to avoid overinvesting in irrelevant intelligence or underreacting to critical threats, all within the constraints of available resources and compliance mandates. The correct approach involves a systematic evaluation of threat intelligence against the organization's specific risk profile and existing security controls. This means prioritizing intelligence that directly relates to the organization's assets, industry, and threat landscape, and then assessing its potential impact and likelihood of exploitation. This approach is right because it ensures that security operations are proactive, risk-informed, and resource-efficient, directly supporting the organization's resilience and compliance objectives. For a CSOM, this aligns with the principle of demonstrating due diligence and a risk-based approach to security management, as often mandated by regulatory bodies that expect organizations to understand and mitigate their specific threats. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the volume or novelty of threat intelligence without contextualizing it to the organization's risk posture is professionally unacceptable. This leads to wasted resources and a false sense of security or unnecessary alarm, failing to address the most pertinent threats. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes intelligence based on sensationalism or the loudest vendor claims, rather than objective risk assessment, demonstrates a lack of critical thinking and a failure to adhere to a structured, evidence-based decision-making process. This can lead to misallocation of resources and a failure to meet regulatory expectations for a robust security program. Furthermore, an approach that neglects to integrate threat intelligence findings into the organization's incident response plans and security control enhancements, treating it as a standalone activity, is a significant ethical and operational failure. It signifies a disconnect between intelligence gathering and actual security posture improvement, leaving the organization vulnerable. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the organization's critical assets and potential threat actors. Threat intelligence should then be gathered and analyzed through the lens of this understanding. The next step is to assess the relevance and potential impact of the intelligence on the organization's specific risk profile. Finally, actionable insights derived from this analysis must be translated into concrete security improvements, policy updates, or incident response plan modifications, with clear metrics for effectiveness. This iterative process ensures that threat intelligence is a dynamic and integral part of the overall security strategy, not a passive data feed. Question 18. The performance metrics show a significant increase in incident response times and a rise in security alerts that are not being effectively triaged. As the Certified Security Operations Manager, you are tasked with recommending improvements to the SOC's physical and logical design. Considering the organization operates under strict data privacy regulations, which of the following approaches best addresses these challenges while ensuring compliance? Option A. Implement a phased approach to redesigning the SOC, starting with a comprehensive risk assessment to identify critical assets and regulatory compliance gaps, followed by the implementation of enhanced physical security controls and a logically segmented network architecture with robust monitoring and logging capabilities tailored to regulatory requirements. Option B. Immediately invest in the most advanced security information and event management, SIEM, and security orchestration, automation and response, SOAR, technologies available to automate alert triage and incident response, deferring physical security upgrades and network architecture changes until budget allows. Option C. Focus solely on increasing SOC staffing levels and providing additional training to existing personnel to handle the increased alert volume and improve response times, without altering the current physical or logical infrastructure. Option D. Prioritize cost reduction by consolidating SOC operations into a less secure, shared facility and implementing a flat network design to simplify management, assuming that the increased alert volume is a temporary anomaly. The correct answer is A. Implement a phased approach to redesigning the SOC, starting with a comprehensive risk assessment to identify critical assets and regulatory compliance gaps, followed by the implementation of enhanced physical security controls and a logically segmented network architecture with robust monitoring and logging capabilities tailored to regulatory requirements. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing immediate operational needs with long-term security posture and compliance requirements. The Security Operations Center, SOC, is a critical asset, and its physical and logical design directly impacts its effectiveness, resilience, and ability to meet regulatory obligations. A rushed or poorly considered design can lead to vulnerabilities, inefficient operation, and potential non-compliance, which can have significant financial and reputational consequences. Careful judgment is required to ensure the design is robust, scalable, and aligned with the organization's risk appetite and the specific regulatory framework governing its operations. The correct approach involves a comprehensive assessment of the organization's specific regulatory obligations, threat landscape, and operational requirements to inform both the physical and logical design of the SOC. This includes ensuring physical security measures, access controls, environmental controls, redundant power/cooling, are adequate to protect the facility and its critical infrastructure, and that logical security measures, network segmentation, secure access controls, logging monitoring tools, are implemented to protect the data and systems processed within the SOC. This approach is correct because it is proactive, risk-based, and directly addresses the need for compliance and operational effectiveness. It aligns with the principles of due diligence and responsible security management expected of a certified security operations manager. Regulatory frameworks often mandate specific security controls and risk assessments, and this approach ensures these are met. An incorrect approach that prioritizes cost savings above all else, without a thorough risk assessment or consideration of regulatory mandates, is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to inadequate physical security, such as insufficient access controls or environmental protections, exposing the SOC to physical threats or operational disruptions. Logically, it might result in a flat network architecture, weak authentication mechanisms, or insufficient logging, all of which create significant security vulnerabilities and increase the risk of breaches. Such an approach fails to meet the fundamental duty of care and could result in regulatory penalties for noncompliance with security standards. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on implementing the latest technology without understanding how it fits into the overall security architecture or meets specific regulatory requirements is also professionally unsound. While advanced tools are important, their effectiveness is diminished if they are not properly integrated, configured, or if they don't address the identified risks and compliance obligations. This can lead to a false sense of security and wasted resources. It fails to demonstrate a strategic and compliant approach to SOC design. A third incorrect approach that neglects the scalability and future growth needs of the SOC, designing only for current requirements, is also problematic. This can lead to costly retrofits and operational disruptions as the organization expands or its threat landscape evolves. It demonstrates a lack of foresight and strategic planning, which is crucial for a resilient and effective SOC. This can indirectly lead to compliance issues if future growth outpaces the ability to maintain required security standards. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk management framework. This begins with identifying all relevant regulatory requirements and organizational policies. Next, conduct a thorough threat and vulnerability assessment specific to the SOC environment. Based on this, define the functional and non-functional requirements for the SOC, considering both physical and logical aspects. Evaluate design options against these requirements, prioritizing those that offer the best balance of security, compliance, operational efficiency, and cost-effectiveness. Document the decision-making process and the rationale for the chosen design, ensuring it can be audited and justified to stakeholders and regulators. Question 19. The control framework reveals a critical logging deficiency in a newly deployed network intrusion detection system, NIDS, that monitors a segment of the corporate network. The SOC team has confirmed that the NIDS is operational and generating alerts, but detailed logs of network traffic and system events are not being captured. What is the most appropriate immediate next step for the Certified Security Operations Manager to take? Option A. Proceed with a scheduled upgrade of the NIDS software and hardware to ensure the latest security features are implemented, assuming this will resolve the logging problem. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive impact assessment to determine the potential risks and consequences of the logging deficiency, considering data sensitivity, business impact, and regulatory requirements. Option C. Immediately disable the NIDS until the logging issue can be fully resolved to prevent potential data corruption or misinterpretation of alerts. Option D. Rely solely on the NIDS alert generation for incident detection and response, assuming the absence of detailed logs does not significantly impair operational effectiveness. Correct answer is B. Initiate a comprehensive impact assessment to determine the potential risks and consequences of the logging deficiency, considering data sensitivity, business impact, and regulatory requirements. Explanation. The control framework reveals a critical gap in the Security Operations Center's (SOC) infrastructure, specifically concerning the logging capabilities of a newly deployed network intrusion detection system, NIDS. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts the SOC's ability to detect, investigate, and respond to security incidents, which are core operational mandates. The absence of comprehensive logging from a key security tool creates blind spots, hindering effective threat hunting and forensic analysis. Careful judgment is required to balance the urgency of remediation with the need for a structured, compliant approach. The correct approach involves a thorough impact assessment of the NIDS logging deficiency. This assessment should quantify the potential risks associated with the lack of logs, considering factors such as the sensitivity of the data processed by the network segment monitored by the NIDS, the potential impact of undetected intrusions on business operations and regulatory compliance, and the time elapsed since the NIDS was deployed without adequate logging. This approach is right because it aligns with the principles of risk management and due diligence mandated by regulatory frameworks such as the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, CSF, and the ISO 27001 standard, which emphasize identifying and assessing risks to information security. Specifically, CSF, Identify Function ID, MID, RA, and ISO 27001, Annex of controls related to asset management and risk assessment require organizations to understand their assets and the threats they face. A structured impact assessment provides the necessary data to prioritize remediation efforts and justify resource allocation, ensuring that the response is proportionate to the identified risks. An incorrect approach would be to immediately disable the NIDS until logging is fully functional. This is professionally unacceptable because it creates a more significant security vulnerability by removing a layer of defense without a clear understanding of the immediate risks posed by the NIDS absence. This failure to maintain continuous security monitoring violates the principle of least privilege and the operational requirement for comprehensive security coverage, potentially leading to undetected breaches. Another incorrect approach would be to assume the NIDS is functioning adequately based on its alert generation, despite the logging issue. This is professionally unacceptable, as it ignores the critical role of logs in incident investigation and validation. Alerts without supporting logs are insufficient for a thorough analysis, potentially leading to false positives or missed critical events. This approach fails to adhere to the principle of evidence-based decision-making in security operations and neglects the requirement for auditability and accountability, which are fundamental to regulatory compliance. A third incorrect approach would be to proceed with a full system upgrade of the NIDS, without first assessing the impact of the logging gap. This is professionally unacceptable because it prioritizes a potentially unnecessary or premature upgrade over addressing the immediate known risk. Without understanding the scope and severity of the logging deficiency, resources might be misallocated, and the core problem of insufficient visibility might not be resolved efficiently. This demonstrates a lack of strategic planning and adherence to a risk-based approach to security operations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic risk assessment. This begins with identifying the asset NIDS, the vulnerability, lack of logging, and the potential threats. Next, the impact of these threats must be assessed, considering business continuity, data integrity, confidentiality, and regulatory obligations. Based on this impact assessment, a risk level is determined, which then guides the prioritization and selection of appropriate mitigation strategies. This ensures that actions taken are proportionate, effective, and compliant with relevant standards and regulations. Question 20. Process analysis reveals that the Security Operations Center, SOC, is receiving a high volume of raw threat data from various sources, and senior management is requesting a concise summary of the most critical threats impacting the organization's specific industry and operational environment. Which approach best addresses this requirement while adhering to the principles of effective threat intelligence management? Option A, focusing only on publicly reported, high-profile cyber attacks and ignoring less publicized but potentially relevant threat indicators. Option B, creating a generic threat intelligence brief that covers broad categories of threats without specific organizational or industry context. Option C, developing a curated threat intelligence report that synthesizes data, assesses relevance and impact, and provides actionable recommendations tailored to the organization's industry and risk profile. Option D, forwarding all raw threat feeds directly to senior management with a disclaimer about potential inaccuracies. The correct answer is D, forwarding all raw threat feeds directly to senior management with a disclaimer about potential inaccuracies. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the Certified Security Operations Manager, CSOM, to balance the immediate need for actionable threat intelligence with the long-term implications of intelligence sharing and the potential for misinterpretation or misuse. The CSOM must navigate the complexities of stakeholder expectations, the dynamic threat landscape, and the ethical considerations of disseminating sensitive information. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the intelligence provided is accurate, relevant, timely, and presented in a manner that facilitates informed decision-making without causing undue alarm or compromising security. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves synthesizing raw threat data into actionable intelligence tailored to specific stakeholder needs and risk appetites. This includes providing context, assessing impact, and offering clear recommendations for mitigation. This aligns with the core responsibilities of a CSOM as outlined in the CSOM framework, which emphasizes the proactive identification, analysis, and communication of threats to enable effective security operations and strategic decision-making. Ethically, this approach prioritizes transparency and informed consent by ensuring stakeholders understand the nature and potential impact of the threats, allowing them to make appropriate risk-based decisions. Incorrect approach is analysis, providing raw, unanalyzed threat feeds without context or interpretation, fails to meet the fundamental requirement of transforming data into actionable intelligence. This approach neglects the CSOM role in providing value-added analysis and can overwhelm stakeholders with irrelevant information, hindering effective response. It also risks misinterpretation and can lead to inefficient resource allocation. Focusing solely on high-severity threats without considering the broader threat landscape or potential for emerging threats overlooks the proactive nature of threat intelligence. This can leave the organization vulnerable to lower severity but more persistent or novel attack vectors. It also fails to provide a comprehensive understanding of the threat environment. Disseminating threat intelligence without considering the specific concerns or operational context of each stakeholder group leads to information overload or irrelevant data. This approach is inefficient and can erode stakeholder trust, as they may perceive the intelligence as not being tailored to their needs, thus failing to support their specific decision-making processes. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured approach to threat intelligence analysis and dissemination. This involves understanding the intelligence lifecycle, from collection and processing to analysis and dissemination. Key steps include defining intelligence requirements based on stakeholder needs, correlating and validating data from multiple sources, assessing the credibility and relevance of indicators, and producing clear, concise, and actionable intelligence products. Professionals must also continuously evaluate the effectiveness of their intelligence processes and adapt to evolving threats and stakeholder requirements.